and gents, welcome to another episode. This episode is actually a part 2. So if you may have seen already on the Peach Guitars channel part 1 to this video series, where I wanted to take a bit of a deeper dive with Jimmy Page and talking about not only his amazing guitar sounds, which is what I covered in part 1, but I also wanted to make a follow-up video here to talk a little bit more about his general playing style and what he means to me as a guitar player, which is actually quite a lot. As I was just prepping a few notes for this video, I started to realise just how impactful Jimmy Page has been on me as a guitar player. So this may turn into a bit of a ramble, if you will. I'm going to be rambling on, but you know, hopefully you'll stick with me through the course of this anyway. So if you are new here to the channel, then welcome to you. Thank you for joining me. It would mean a lot to me if you can subscribe to the channel and make sure you leave a like and comment down below with your thoughts when you've seen this video. I want to know what you think. It all helps me out. But anyway, let's get into it. So, Jimmy Page. As I said before, part 1 of this little series was all about the tones. So if you're familiar with the Peach Guitars Tale of Two Tones series that we do, basically that was what I did for that, where I just sat down with a few bits of Jimmy Page style equipment and went through kind of my thoughts on getting some of his sounds. Now he's another one of those guys that's just impossible to nail down, because so much of his sound is in his rather frantic, a lot of the time, playing style, and it gave birth obviously to some of these incredible riffs and incredible songs. And it's so hard to bottle that energy. But obviously using certain bits of gear will get you close. The stuff I'm using today is not exact, you know, you can only get so close with the gear. But if you want to find out more about that, and if you haven't seen it already, then part 1 of this series is the place for that. I'll link it below. So I've just grabbed my Les Paul and plugged it into the Dr. Z Remedy, and nothing really going on in terms of effects. And yet, just by trying my hardest to enter the mindset of Jimmy Page and play in that way, I think that's where the magic lies. And obviously that's your mileage may vary with that. Everyone has a different interpretation of Jimmy Page as well, I think, and that's because he's such a chameleon as a guitar player that it's actually very hard to say what is the Jimmy Page sound. You know, if you track the course of his career from his very early days as a session player, naturally that kind of breeding ground leads you to just have to cover so many different stylistic bags, as I guess they would have called them in the 60s. You know, have lots of these styles down. And eventually, just by kind of infusing all these different styles and requirements into your playing, it creates your own sound. And so he used that, I think, to propel forwards into the Yardbirds and obviously with Zeppelin and so on. And I guess it was just that kind of constant need to just feed your musical brain, or feed his musical brain, I think, is probably where he just got such an eclectic and wide-ranging style from, and it meant that Zeppelin's music in particular explored all these different avenues, and he was kind of the brains behind it, a lot of the time anyway, at least in my opinion. So I thought that, you know, as it is such a big topic and he is such a huge guitar player, the only thing I can do is speak from my own personal standpoint and where his music leapt out at me from. And I have to say, you know, I'm very keen on this channel of pulling out little tidbits of random relics from my collection. This is another one of them. I got this DVD when I think it was probably around the same time that I got my first guitar. And I remember I had a Deep Purple CD, I had a Status Quo CD, and I got this DVD from my lovely parents. And this just completely enraptured me. This Led Zeppelin DVD, that's the only title it's got. But I recommend that if you're not a Zeppelin fan, or if you're not a Zepp nut, I'm not particularly a Zepp nut, but if you have no clue about who they are or what they did or what Jimmy Page's guitar style was, this is all you really need to know, I feel. Because it's got, I think, 4 or 5 different real landmark concerts of theirs, starting from like the Albert Hall in 1970, Madison Square Garden in 73, Earl's Court in 1975, and Nebworth in 79, which is one of the last performances. And just watching this as a very, very young kid, I guess aged 8 or 9 or something, this was like absolute magic, because there was just such a variety, not only sonically but the aesthetics as well. Every show looked different, they had different outfits, but the one constant was Jimmy's guitar playing, and I kind of learned a lot in my early days as a guitar player from watching that concert DVD. And what's interesting is that Zeppelin are one of those bands that I never felt they recorded as well as they played live, and I think that was a constant struggle for artists in the 60s and 70s. And actually, starting from like seeing their live stuff, and then later on discovering the studio albums, kind of left me a bit underwhelmed, I think, because it was obviously a lot more tame. There wasn't such a high degree of energy and frantic, kind of just high octane rock that the live stuff had. So it kind of, but what it did in turn was showed me how you can kind of siphon down that super high energy live rock sensibility onto an album, and kind of opened up the door to the world of production a little bit. And that's kind of where I got some understanding of how do you make songs work on record and then blow them up in a live context. And that's obviously what Zeppelin were kind of the masters of. But as I say, it's different for everybody. Everyone discovers Zeppelin at a different point, so that's kind of the way I came into it anyway. And what it subsequently did, more so than any other guitar player I think in my very early days, was it gave me a burning desire and a burning love for this instrument, the Les Paul. And you can see over my shoulder there, that Sunburst Les Paul copy up there. That was one of my first guitars, and I desperately wanted to sound like Jimmy Page, and Ace Frehley as well, but Jimmy Page was kind of the guy that started it off, like I said, from watching this DVD. And, you know, so I changed pickups and all sorts on that guitar, but I learned to play with a Les Paul, basically, and that kind of very heavy-handed approach that Jimmy had, that's kind of where I came from as well, with that real driving rock sensibility. Obviously later on I came to appreciate the more delicate side of his playing as well, but that's where it all came together for me. It was just laying into the guitar. And when it came to get this guitar, some years later, I basically, you know, as I said, taking some notes for this video today, I realised that I put so much effort into making this guitar sound like the Les Pauls that Jimmy used. And what I mean by that is, I've always favoured a brighter sounding guitar. And I've talked about this at length in other videos actually, and the current crop of like Gibson custom shop guitars, they have it out the box. They have that bright, wiry, zingy kind of Telecaster on steroids sound. This one is a few years old. I had to work at this a little bit to get that out of it. But I realised that's what I was always chasing, kind of chasing the treble that his sound had. And it's refreshing because a lot of other guitar players who played Les Pauls would have this darker, thicker sound. But Jimmy Page did not. He had this very strident and authoritative kind of tone from a Les Paul, which it's actually quite hard to achieve. And I think a lot of people that go for Zeppelin sounds don't quite get there because so much of it is in the heavy attack and actually having a fairly clean and bright sound. If I give you an example of that, I'm not going to delve too deeply into the tones in this video because, like I said, I've done that in part one. But what you'll have heard at the intro there is this sound. You know, that is not an everything on 10 kind of sound. If you listen back to the Van Halen video that I did a couple of videos ago, very different to that, and yet it's the same amp. It's a lot cleaner, and I've always loved that. I've always loved that sound, and I love that approach because what it means is that every little nuance that comes out of this equally important part as well, the Herco Dunlop nylon pick, every little nuance that comes out of this is just translated in high definition. And you know, you can get into each song on each album and everything has a different sound. But you hear it more so in the live examples that are on this DVD and other recordings, but you hear that Jimmy made all those nuances happen with this kind of a setup, with this kind of a sound, just by varying his playing style. And that is credit to a man who knows everything about the dynamics of the music that he's performing. And that can't be said for a lot of guitar players, really. Now, the other kind of thing to address is the sloppiness factor. And that is something that always gets branded on Jimmy Page. He's a sloppy guitar player. I'm inclined to agree with that. You know, when you listen to some of his guitar tracks, especially on the live stuff, he's all over the place, and who can blame him? He's probably off his head on various substances anyway, and the adrenaline just led to this real frantic playing style, which, as I said at the very start of this video, is just impossible to capture. But a great example of it is the live version of Since I've Been Loving You, which I kind of alluded to at the start of the video. It's from one of these concerts. It's from the Madison Square Garden. And that was always the one, when I watched that DVD, that was the track that did it for me, because he's pouring with sweat, and he's just swaggering about the stage, and he's just playing his absolute heart out on the Les Paul, playing this slow blues, erratically, really. Some would say sloppy, but it's so interesting to listen to if you actually study it. And to me, Jimmy Page has always been one of the very best blues guitar players, because he's one of the most interesting to listen to. If you listen to that song, or if you listen to T for One, which was also, I was sort of playing a bit of that at the start, you know, a later recording, when you listen to him play the blues, it's not like listening to a Clapton or even a Jeff Beck. I mean, he's on a similar sort of plane, I think, to Beck in some ways. But with Jimmy, you can hear his mind working, I think, as he's working through the changes of a blues progression. And there's lots of these interesting little notes, lots of seconds. And you know, I've taken this from that Since I've Been Loving You live thing, the way it ends. Who the hell ends a blues with that? I mean, I know it's not strictly a blues track, but that's why I love Jimmy Page, is because he just took all these different influences and managed to channel them into something that everyone could get. And it's not until you start to unravel it, like I am doing now, that it all sort of pieces apart, and you can pick out all these different little identities of styles that all came together to make the Jimmy Page sound. And there's not a lot of guitar players, at least the ones that I've sort of taken the time to analyse, that have that same depth of musical character. You know, I mean, I'm throwing a lot of kind of grandiose terms out here, but I really feel that way about Jimmy Page. He's such an interesting guy, and on top of all that, when he was on stage, he was the coolest guitar player that's ever existed. I don't think there's another contender in terms of sheer cool factor, the way he would move, the fact that his guitar was so low. And you know, an interesting story, I have some friends that do you know, in the tribute music world, as I am from time to time, and I got the chance to step in on a gig once, playing a Jimmy Page role, and it was the most, I mean, I was a lot younger anyway, but it was the most nerve-wracking thing, because up to that point I had studied all these little facets of his sound and his technique and his approach and his look on stage. You know, it's all part of the package. And it was so hard, and I went to the extent of, you know, I put 8s on the guitar, 8-gauge strings. I put the strap down where I knew he would have it. The violin bow, all that stuff, and you know what came out. Probably, I haven't heard or seen any recordings of that show for a long time. It probably does not hold up to my standards nowadays, but it was a lot of fun, and it was very intense. And you know, there's so many things that you can study about Jimmy Page, but the best thing in the world is that was just how he was. That's just what came out of him. And to be honest, it still does. I got the chance to see him join the Foo Fighters on stage at Wembley Stadium about 12 years ago, I think it was, as a surprise thing. I was there with my dad. He came out with John Paul Jones, and he just tore into a couple of Zeppelin tracks. And you know, he's not quite as accurate as he used to be. He doesn't need to be. He's Jimmy Page, man. He's Jimmy Page. So, incredibly cool guitar player. there's a lot of mystique to him, but it's not until you really sit down and focus on it that I realise how much I've absorbed of that. And I'm in no way, shape or form anywhere near as cool as Jimmy Page is, but I think when it comes to playing some mean rock guitar, I can kind of hold my own, and that is in large part due to one Jimmy Page. So anyway, that's it for part 2. I hope you've enjoyed this section as well, and if you haven't seen it, as I say, go back and check out part 1, because that's more technical about the gear that he used. And really, you know, even in this section, I'm only scraping the surface of his styles. Like I said, there's so many different facets to his tone, but I wanted to kind of go down a bit more of the blues playing angle, which is something I don't think gets talked about with him enough. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's scratched your Jimmy Page itch, if you like. It certainly has mine. So that's it. Thanks for watching another episode, folks. Like I say, leave me a like and comment with your thoughts if you can. I really appreciate that. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because I notice a lot of people who view my stuff here are not subscribed. It would really help me if you can hit that button. There's going to be plenty more of these videos to come. I have a lot of fun doing them, and I like your input as well. I like your questions and so on. So let's keep it going, guys. So anyway, until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.